Today, I'll share with you how to create responsive grids or achieve responsive layouts using grids in Figma. But before we get started, if you're still trying to work your way around Figma, we have a comprehensive Figma basics tutorial that you can watch to get started. It covers all the fundamentals of designing with Figma, which makes it perfect for any beginner in the world of UI design. The video is up there in the card, so make sure to watch it if you want to learn more. Hey everyone, it's JC here, designer at CodeWithChris, the place to learn iOS app development. I was a copywriter by profession, but I always had a passion for design in general and later on developed a strong interest in UI and UX design. Now, I'm becoming a better designer every day through practice and study, and this series is about that journey. If you have an interest in design and want to learn more about this field, I hope I can inspire you to pursue it. Without further ado, let's start learning design. There are four main things that we'll talk about in this video. First, the importance of having grids. Second, the most popular grid systems you can use. Third, how to set up responsive grids that you can use and reuse for your projects. And lastly, we'll take a look at a real-world example on how having a grid can help you. Chapters and timestamps are available below if that's your thing. And with that out of the way, let's get started. So first things first, why responsive grids? So one of the very first things that I learned when I started in this field is how important it is to have a structure for our design. When I was starting out, I would just align UI elements according to my taste. If I see that it's aligned, then it's good to go. If it's not, I just rely on the alignment options on Figma or just drag them until they snap on the same baseline, same line height, and all those things. Sometimes I would also calculate the spacing between elements and just remember them all throughout the process of designing the UI. However, as I progressed and learned more about designing UIs, I realized that my old process was counterproductive and would result in poor UI organization because it did not follow a grid structure. So much so that when the UI was applied in a device of a different size, it would result in pure chaos and me having to adjust the UI elements from scratch again. Now, all of these things can be avoided with a responsive grid system. A grid system is a somewhat invisible structural guide that will allow you to find some rhythm in your design since everything from text to buttons to images will be placed consistently throughout the screen. Now, if you're wondering how to create a grid layout, grid structure, or grid system, first you need to know what they are and some of the most common systems out there. So, grid systems. What exactly are they? Well, in UI design, there are two most common systems that you can use. There's the 8-point grid system and the 4-point grid system. What these 8-point and 4-point essentially mean is that your UI elements will be divisible by those numbers. So if you follow the 8-point grid system, your elements will be divisible by 8, whereas if you follow the 4-point grid system, they will be divisible by 4. So in that case, for example, your margins will be 20 or 16 if you follow the 4-point grid system because 28 or 16 are divisible by 4. And your input field could be 12 pixels in height. Your buttons will be 24 pixels in height. The spacing between two input fields will be 8 pixels and so on. Basically, all of them, or most of them, for example, can be or should be divisible by 4. So personally, I prefer to use the 4-point grid system because it's more granular, meaning you can be a little bit more intricate with your design, especially in Figma, which has a dense workspace that is geared towards productivity and efficiency. And apart from that, companies like Google in their material design system also use a 4-point grid layout. In terms of Apple's own design system, I'm not too sure which one they use, but regardless whether you go for 8-point or 4-point, the principle and the goal are still the same: having consistent, structured, and responsive user interface. And once you get familiar with the principle behind these grid systems, you'll be able to create a grid system yourself for your app, and you'll no longer have to worry about it looking funky when displayed on a bigger screen like an iPhone 13 Pro Max or a smaller screen like the iPhone 13 Pro Mini or iPhone 13 Mini. So yeah, those are some of the fundamental things that you need to know about grid systems. There's still a lot to learn about them, but I won't go over the more advanced stuff to keep this video short. But if you want to learn more, I'll put some links in the description for some articles that you can read, like this one by Dre the Shepherd on Medium. I'm not so sure how to pronounce the name. He has an article, links in the description. Give that a read if you want. So all said and done, we've touched on the rationale behind the grid system. Now it's time to put that into application and set up a responsive grid system in Figma. Right now, we have a Figma file. So first things first, on your Figma workspace, you'll want to create a frame. I'll press the frame tool, select a whichever screen size that you want. I'll choose the iPhone 11 Pro or iPhone 10. Let's rename this as demo. So at this point, it really doesn't matter whichever screen size that you choose because we're creating a responsive grid after all. But I just have a strong preference for this size right here because I think it's one of the most common screen sizes around the world. I'm not so sure. I don't have the data for that. So yeah, I just want to put that out there. So from here, let's select this frame, then go to layout grid, make sure the frame is selected, layout grid. And then on the right panel, click on the plus icon and go to the settings of this tab and make sure to select columns first. And now you'll see we have columns displayed in red just by clicking columns. So you can change the color of this column by going here, change it to whatever you want, an example. But let's just keep it to red at 10% because it's the default. So from here, what you'll want to do is to change all, if not most of the values that are displayed on the screen. So count is simply the number of columns that will be displayed in our frame. So for our 4-point grid system, we're going to have count set to 4. So type can be thought of as the position of the columns. So if you set that in the center, the columns will be in the center. And if this resize, it will stay in the center. So if put that on the left, it will stay on the left, whichever, regardless of your screen size, and right, and so on and so on. So in our case, since we want to create a responsive grid for various sizes of mobile devices, we want to set it to stretch. Whenever we resize the frame, the layout grid follows the size of our artboard, which is basically the behavior of a responsive grid or a responsive design. So let's get this back to default. So next is margin. Margin is basically the margin or space between the actual workspace or UI and the device. So think of this frame as the screen dimensions of an iPhone 10. So when you play on present, you'll see the iPhone 10 device right here, just like that. So this white space is the actual UI. This covers edge to edge. So when we're designing a UI, we almost never want to create elements outside the safe area because it could result in a poor user experience and an unpleasant look. So we always want to set our margins into something that's divisible by 4 as well, such as 16 or 20. So next is the gutter. The gutter is basically the spacing between columns. So having gutters are quite useful, especially if you're planning to design a carousel or something with a horizontal scroll feature. So we also want to set this to something that's divisible by 4, which is 8. And that's it. So, okay, so our column settings are done. Next, we're going to want to apply another layout grid. So on the right panel, just click on the plus icon again, click on the settings and choose rows. So this will be pretty quick. Just want to make sure that count is set to 1000. The type is set to top. Height is set to 4, divisible by 4. Offset 0 and gutter 0. Just like that. So the reason behind this setting is that whenever we want to snap a UI element to our horizontal axis, the baseline of that property will always be divisible by 4 because of our height that's set to 4. And because our count is set to 1000, this row basically goes on and on, which can be useful if you have a very long app page. Though if you happen to find yourself exhausting all of the 1000 rows, just like this, then you may have to rethink your app design, okay? So yeah, just keep it reasonably long because we don't want to design like an infinite scroll, well, depending if on your intention. So save that. And now you have your solid grid system. Now from here, we want to make sure that we'll be able to reuse this grid system for all the pages in our app project. So to do that, we'll have to create a style out of this layout grid property. So click on style right here, click on the plus icon and click on, let's rename this to maybe mobile. Just like that, mobile. So if you watched our previous lesson on styles and components on Figma, then you'll already have an idea on how to do this. If not, I highly suggest that you watch that video because familiarizing styles and components can really work wonders for your workflow. Okay, so let's check the styles again. So as you can see, the columns and rows we just made are already combined in one style, this mobile style. So we just click on, for example, let's create another one, another iPhone 10, and click on layout grids, mobile, and basically the rows and columns have been applied. So that just gives us easy access in the future. From here, there's one last thing that we need to do, and it's outside this layout grid property. So on your Figma workspace, click on this Figma icon or Figma menu or main menu, click on preferences and choose nudge amount. And here we'll change the big nudge to 4 instead of 10. So in case you didn't know, nudge refers to the movement of an element in pixels. So if you click on a button, for example, let's create a button right here. Let's first hide the layout grid so we can have a better visualization. So here's a button, and if you click on the arrow key one time, that's a small nudge and it will move 1 pixel to the right. As you can see, this is the x-axis. Let's move that to the right. Oh, there's one nudge. So now our x value is 21. Press the right arrow key again, 22, 23, 24. Basically, that's the small nudge. So if your small nudge is set to 10, then every time you press any of your arrow keys, the element will move 10 pixels to that direction. So ideally, a small nudge is always set to 1, so you can make very little adjustments in your UI, just like that. So big nudge, on the other hand, is when you hold Shift plus any arrow key on the keyboard. So since our big nudge is set to 4, whenever we hold Shift and the right arrow key, for example, let's set this to back to 30. So let's hold Shift and press the right arrow key. The element will move 4 pixels to the right. So as you can see, we went from 30 to 34 by pressing Shift and the right arrow key. Press that again, we move another 4 pixels with a total of 8 pixels since the original position. So we're now 38 pixels from the left, or since we started. So regardless of how many times you press Shift and the arrow key, you can rest assured that the position will always be divisible by 4. So now you have a grid system that you can use for a whole app project. So just a quick demonstration with our grid systems in place. Let's put some basic UI elements and see how this would work. So for our demonstration, let's just remove this frame because we don't need it anymore. So in here, I already have some pre-made UI elements or organisms, if you watch our previous video, that we just need to put on our frame with the grid in place. So let's just remove this frame, ungroup. So these are just organisms that I could just drag and drop on the frame. So first things first, let's create a frame, iPhone 11 Pro, so on. And using our style that we made earlier, let's just click on this, mobile. And you can always adjust the opacity of this. So just go to maybe 5. And same goes for here, 5. And if you want to disable them or hide them temporarily, you can just always, as a shortcut, you can press Control G on your keyboard. If you are in the Mac, press Control G, just like that. Layout grids, hidden, visible, hidden, visible. Or you can just press this eye icon right here. But if you want to work fast, use the shortcut. So with our UI pre-made UI elements, let's just drag and drop this one. So as you can see, it snaps on our grids or lines that we just set a while ago. So regardless of the position that we set this on, it will always be divisible by 4. As you can see, 36 and just like that. Okay, so next is learn courses with CWC Plus and all those things. Let's just drag it here. So let's just make sure to select this both. Make sure that they are divisible by 4, like maybe 16 or even 12 or 8. And make sure that they're aligned. Just like that. So here, let's make sure that they are divisible by 4, 32. And this is 8. And let's just disable that. Maybe that's okay. Just an example. So here, let's make sure that this is divisible by 4 again. 24. So put that on. So as you can see, it snaps. So this is the button. The height of this button is 44, which is divisible by 4. And as you can see, it snaps just just right to that rows that we made a while ago. So here's the top row, the bottom row, I mean the bottom line, top line, and it snaps on from top to bottom. So that's the first half of our UI. And from here, let's just drag it here. Just get this assets right here, just drag and drop them. Make sure that they are divisible by 4 again, maybe 24, maybe 16, maybe 8, 12, something like that. From here, make sure, yeah, they are 24, but you want to make sure that they have a little more space to make this 32. And this one will be 12, just like that. As you can see, again, oops, we want to make sure that it's 20 pixels. So let's make sure that it will snap. So that's the beauty of this layout grid, because it will snap on that column, the edge of that column. Make sure it's 12, just like that. So as you can see right here, it doesn't exactly snap on this top row because the baseline of our font also goes beyond that top row line, that's this line. So it will follow the, if you set them individually in this 12, 12, what's going to happen is that it will really not snap to that rows that we just made earlier. So let's make sure that it will snap just like that, just like that. So you can always just set this. So you can always just adjust the line height of this font and make sure. And now they are 12. And from here, as you can see, when you click on that, it snaps. You click on this, it snaps. And when you click on them both, you can see they're divisible by 12. So let's double check on our first carousel list. So this is a carousel, by the way. So if you want to see the list all the way to the right, so you just need to uncheck clip content. And here, let's just move it right there. And that's it. Let's remove this again. Yeah. Let's just drag it here. Oops. Make sure that this is left and right and top. Just drag it like that. And then same goes for the next item. So we can just fast forward this. Now, one thing left for us to do is to, resize this. Make sure that the space is around 64 maybe, or 80, because we want it to keep divisible by 4 again. So 80 is somewhere here. There you go. 80 somewhere, 64 rather. And let's just adjust the bottom again. And there you have it. It snaps perfectly and it snaps perfectly. So remove this guide. So it's just a rectangle that I often use serve as a guide. And when we remove the layout grids and press on present, it will show us this UI. So as you can see, if you click on the frame, press present, it shows us the UI and it looks good. It has the rhythm, it has that structure because we followed the 4-point grid. So as you can see, each item on the carousel span 3 columns. And the second the second item is on the 4th column, and it sort of bleeds over the edge of that device. So this is one of the few instances where you can design outside of the margins or the safe area of the UI, because we intended, or we want people to scroll, or we want people to interpret that this is a scrollable list, just like that. So when you scroll, it also functions just like that. So that's the beauty of the 4-point grid. We have the structure. We don't have the status bar right here, but that's okay, because this is just to give you a demonstration on how UI grids work. So we have the 4-column grid, the 1000 rows, and all those sort of things. As you can see, we have a little bit of mistake right here. For some reason, I think the second has a bit more space than usual, right? Ah, now I see. Okay, so here we go. Just like that. So the second one is correct. It's the third one that isn't. First and third one, third rows weren't correct. As you can see, that's better. All right. Let's make some more adjustments. So just like that, we just made some editing and present again. Now you can see it's much more structured, much more consistent. So yeah, that's the beauty of the 4-point grid system again, or any other grid system, because you can easily spot some mistakes, some inconsistency on your design, and you can remedy it immediately. So that's just one very spontaneous instance that I gave you. So because we follow the grid system, any inconsistency will be spotted immediately and we can easily resolve that. And now we have a responsive grid system and a more structured UI. All right, so that's all the basics of creating responsive UI grids in Figma. But before we end, I just want to inform you guys that our chat app mini course is now live in our CWC Plus program. So in there, you'll have access to lessons on how to design and develop a simple chat app, plus all other courses in our CWC Plus catalog. So links in the description if you're interested. So with that out of the way, I hope you learned something. Like and subscribe if you did. Leave a comment if you have any questions or suggestions. And again, thank you for learning design with me, and I'll see you in the next video.